Thank you. Okay, well, lovely to see you all. Just as usual, let's take a bit of time to arrive. Find a comfortable posture. Bring our attention from wherever it is now to the gates of the senses, to what we can see, hear, smell, any residual tastes, and the totality of felt, somatic, bodily sensations. Just bringing the attention there, gently returning it if any other internal or external stimuli distracts it. As much as possible, allowing mind and body to settle into the natural state. Picking up the rhythm of the breath in the body, known by its sensations, just resting there a while. Letting go as much as possible, still in body, speech, and mind, with the senses vividly alive. In that quieter space, set up the motivation for the retreat today. Begin by reciting together or following the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha in English. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides. Oh, my apologies, I need to go back for the other 2 recitations. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best. Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, colour like gold. To you I prostrate. Dust free like you, 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Saviour having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean. To you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality. To the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community, intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms. In all aspects, with supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. And then to turn our minds and hearts to the recitation of the heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on Masavulcha's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There's no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata gate gate, paragate parasangate, bodhi soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. And we make the prayer to Simhamukha, the lion-faced Dakini. I prostrate to the gathering of Dakinis in the three chakras, who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Aka Samara Sashadara Samaraya Payak. Aka, Samara, Sashadara, Samara, Yape, Taya, Taya, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgati, Bodhisoha. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled. May they be pacified. Shintim Kuru Yesoha. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. And then to glance through the main topics of the Lam Rim, using it as a glance meditation supported by the poetry of Lama Tsongkhapa. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru. Correct devotion to him or her is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him or her with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays when death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother migratory beings. Please bless me to see this, train in supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta but don't practice the three types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I have pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments is keeping the pure vows and samaya. As I have become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus who show the noble path and the spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. In all my lives, never separated from perfect Gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of the stages and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. We offer a mandala, using the short mandala. We'll recite in Tibetan and then follow with the English. Saji Puki Jugjing Meto Tram Rirab Lingji Nide Gyan Pali Sangye Hindu Mite Uwai Rokunam Dahingla this ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Ida Muratna Mandala Kamniyataya Sangye Chodang Soki Chonam La Jangchu Badu Dakni Kyapsu Shi Dage Chunyan Gipe Sonam Gi Rola Panchia Sangye Drupa Ju Sangye Chodang Soki Chonam La Jangchu Badu Dakni Kyapsu Shi Dage Chunyan Gipe Sonam Gi Rola Panchia Sange Rupa. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Thank you. In that spirit, let's enter into the next stage on the retreat. So we were talking about interdependence. We were talking, if you remember, we were going through trying to understand how ignorance of Vidya kind of is responsible for us assenting to things existing in a way that they don't, mistaking appearances for reality. And this, of course, not meaning that things don't exist at all, just that the appearance that we mistake for reality appears in a way that is actually illusory. It's illusion-like in that sense. And the insight is the way to be free of that. And much like the optical illusions, we looked at the Mulalaya illusion yesterday, the illusion in that sense doesn't change. But once you know it for what it is, you can see the nature of it and its reality. And there was a rather beautiful example of the way things appear to exist in their own right from their own side or whatever, but in actual fact don't exist in the way that they appear, that's in the text that we're using. And this is following through, this is on page, anybody who's actually following it, I think this is page 63 to 64 of How See Yourself as You Really Are. And I think it's, it's good to sort of sum up where we've got to and where we are, just to read that passage from His Holiness. And he says, there's no question that persons and things exist. The question is how or in what manner they exist. When we consider a flower, for instance, and think, this flower has a nice shape, nice colour, nice texture, it seems as if there's something concrete that possesses these qualities of shape, colour and texture. When we look into these qualities as well as the parts of the flower, they seem to be qualities or parts of the flower, such as the colour of the flower, the shape of the flower, the stem of the flower, and the petals of the flower, as if there is a flower that possesses these qualities or parts. However, if the flower really exists in the way that it appears, we should be able to come up with something separate from all of these qualities and parts that is the flower, but we cannot. Such a flower is not to be found upon analysis or through other scientific tools, even though previously it seemed so substantial, so findable. Because a flower has effects, it certainly exists, but when we search to find a flower existing in accordance with our ideas about it, that is not at all findable. Something that truly exists from its own side should become more and more obvious when analysed. It should be clearly found, but the opposite is the case. Nevertheless, This does not mean that it does not exist, for it is effective. It creates effects. The fact that it is not found under analysis just indicates that it does not exist in the way that it appears to our senses and to our thoughts. That is, so concretely established within itself. Not finding objects when they're analysed meant that if not finding objects when they're analysed meant that they did not exist, there would be no sentient beings, no bodhisattvas, no Buddhas, nothing pure and nothing impure. There'd be no need for liberation. There'd be no reason to meditate on emptiness. However, it's obvious that persons and things help and harm, that pleasure and pain exist, that we can free ourselves from pain and gain happiness. It would be foolish to deny the existence of persons and things when we are obviously affected by them. The idea that persons and things do not exist is a denial of the obvious. It's foolish. The Indian scholar yogi Nagarjuna demonstrates that phenomena are empty of inherent existence by the fact that they are dependent arisings. This itself is a clear sign that the view that phenomena do not inherently exist is not nihilistic. He does not give as the reason why permanent phenomena are empty, that they are unable to function. Instead, he calls attention to the fact that they arise dependent on causes and conditions. And then you remember we kind of finished thinking we'll go and sort of meditatively reflect on what we'd heard. And I was sort of suggesting we think about dependent, the ideas of concepts of dependent and interdependent as a dichotomy. See it as a division or contrast between two things that are usually represented as being opposed or entirely different. You know, that anything that exists is either one or the other, dependent or interdependent. And then kind of reflecting that dependent and interdependent are also relative, you know, both to one another and also in relation to other things. And we can be more or less dependent on things to a greater or lesser degree, but there's no absolute inherently existing dependence or interdependence. So the idea that anything exists wholly independent on its own, not depending on anything at all, singular, permanent, partless, completely self-sufficient, is a kind of a fantasized notion of existence. You know, I mean, nothing really exists or could exist in that way. When something is dependent, it must be empty of being wholly kind of under its own power. So we think about ourselves. Nowhere in the parts of the body and the mind that form the basis for us to use the personal pronoun I can we find anything that this refers to that's in any way separate from those things that we designated upon. There's nothing there that's not in some way dependent on them. Yeah. So therefore, the kind of insight here is that the I is not established under its own power from its own side by itself, but through the force of other conditions. And those three kind of, we can classify those as three, you know, its causes, its parts, and by thought. And that's kind of where we got to. And I invited you to kind of start reflecting in that way off the basis of establishing in sessions on the cushion some shamatha, some calm abiding, some attentional balance and stability, introduce those sort of reflections and then not take it too far and get too bound up in it, but then at a certain point to just drop and rest with whatever, quote, conclusion you had. And that conclusion would be somewhat more experiential feeling for it than necessarily intellectual. So that's where we are. It's a good opportunity to say, how have you found it in your practice from then to now, or in your reflections, or in no doubt been digesting what we heard yesterday. So now's a good time for any questions, comments, thoughts, anything you want to share.
Olia, would you like to unmute yourself, lower your hand and ask your question? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, thank you so much, Roy. No, this has really reinforced. Well, you know, it was a great opportunity yesterday to, and right now, you know, with your conclusion to be able to practice this vision again, which I think once at least I practice it, it becomes more and more tangible, which is nice. I guess one question that has arisen yesterday for me was, how did the illusionary thought came about? Well, the illusionary vision, I guess, or delusion came about, and if it has been beginningless, as the minds are, then how come we can end it? So I think that sort of the connection with the beginningless part of it is still something that I cannot fully reconcile. And I wonder if you could give some insight on this. But otherwise, it's been, yeah, thank you very much. It's been quite a good experience.
Yeah, I think it's a very good and actually quite deep and profound question. With regard to, it's almost like saying, what is the origin of ignorance itself? You know, when the Buddha was teaching the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. You know, realizing the suffering nature of existence, and then looking for the origin of the suffering, and having found the origin of the suffering to be avidya, or ignorance in this sense, then realizing that if you cut it at the root and have direct insight into the nature of reality, you can bring about a cessation of suffering and realize nirvana, or full enlightenment, full potential, and so on. But this question is going to, well, when you get to the second noble truth, what was the origin of the ignorance in the first place? And I think you're right. Certainly the sutras and the Buddha's own teaching gesture in the direction of beginninglessness and endlessness. Yeah, and certainly I don't have a problem with that, in the sense that I really don't know. You know, it goes back for me endlessly, and if I look into the future, it goes forward infinitely. And it's only a very acculturated view of these things. In my case, it's Western, so a lot of it is governed philosophically and in other ways by ideas that go back to classical Greece. So, you know, Aristotle, for example, pondering what was the first cause. And then we get involved in thinking, yeah, I wonder what was the first cause. But of course, there's a massive assumption being made that there was a first cause. There's no logical necessity for there to be a first cause, and there's no logical necessity for there to be an end. In fact, anywhere east of the Middle East, they'd say no problem at all. Things, you know, it doesn't have to have had a beginning. I think sort of, but the way Western culture is, we take that as an assumption and kind of obsess around it. You know, there must be an original cause. So that's just one to keep as a good open question. You know, beginningless, endless. Well, it certainly appears like that to me, because there's no need for me to assume that there was a beginning or there will be an end. It's an infinitely open future and a beginningless past. That's kind of okay. When you come to the kind of related question of why was it that way, then largely, if you're looking into textual sources, you're into a mythology, but quite a powerful mythology that would say there was an oops, there was a kind of a oops. It's like you'd have to kind of think, bring a little cosmology into it maybe, and you think of, you know, as His Holiness says, he doesn't have a problem with the Big Bang theory. He just thinks it's a series of Big Bangs, yeah. And then you think of the maybe the Hindu image of Shiva Nataraj, you know, winding up universes, the universe thing concentrates and then expands, concentrates and then expands, concentrates and then expands. So if you imagine that period where it's gone like that and then expands again, one can, and some suggestions in the text are, you think of consciousness or awareness as opening up at that point. And as it opens up, there's a possibility not to be deceived by the illusion. But if the individual consciousness is, oops, it's gone. And if you look maybe particularly into the Nyingma and Dzogchen traditions, Samantabhadra, the all good, remains seeing reality directly as it is. Other beings, because of their karma and all sorts of other things, are seduced into thinking things exist in the way they appear when they don't. So if you wanted to be cheeky about it, you say, whereas the Christians have the idea of original sin, the Buddhists have the idea of original, oops, mistaken appearances for reality. Yeah, sort of like that. And then suffering occurs as a result. Anyway, these are really just mythological and cosmological thoughts, but they might be helpful to point in a certain direction. So I think that's occurred. And then there's a third thing that comes out that's, I think, is really, really important. And that's to remember that if the whole shooting match was an illusion, there would be no way out. But because it is illusion-like, i.e. the appearance actually exists, as His Holiness pointed out, because it's effective, here we all are. It's not a question of nihilism or non-existence. So it appears like an illusion, but because it is not totally illusory, insight gives the possibility of finding a way out. Back to my pointing at the optical illusions, saying that having the insight doesn't mean that the illusion changes, but by knowing it, you're no longer puzzled because you see it for what it is. Those two lines are the same. They only appear that way because. I found an even more fascinating one that you might want to try at home. Normally you're advised not to try it at home, aren't you? But I was looking at it only this morning. And it's one where you paint two, or pen two arrows on a piece of paper, both pointing the same way, put them behind a glass of water and pour the water in. It appears that one turns around the other way because of a refraction illusion. Well, if you're a child or whatever, you're kind of like this. You know, I can imagine as a child looking at sticks bending in water. Now, once you feel them, and you think, oh, no, they don't. Put it out. Oh, it's still straight. But when we put it in, it still appears like an illusion. But we know what's going on because we've got a direct perception by insight into the nature of the reality of that phenomenon. So it's kind of, it's like that. So if there was, if it was completely illusory, there would be no way out. But because it's illusion-like, then being able to have and cultivate insight to experience a direct perception of reality and wake up to the way things actually are is what liberation from samsara and full enlightenment is perhaps all about. Is that helpful?
Thank you very much, Roy. Yeah, that's very helpful. I guess what then arises, if you don't mind me sort of, you know, reflecting on it, is that in my mind is that if, you know, I don't have a problem posing that there is, you know, the phenomena of illusion or has been or delusional view has been beginningless, but I guess what happens is if, and that it will continue, but I guess then the question arises, so if we accept that, you know, it will be continuous, the intention of liberating all beings from suffering is also going to be endless in that sense. Is that how, well, is that true in the sense, is that how texts perceive it, or there is an end? Because that, I think, is actually the fundamental question that I'm trying to have an answer to, in a way.
Yes, it's also a very good one. It's one, and it's one that's again reflected in the mythos of the tradition, if you like. It's the cause of the tears of Avalokiteshvara. He makes a vow to free all sentient beings from suffering. You know, this enormous kind of universal compassion. But because of the beginningless and endless nature of it and the vast numbers of sentient beings, he realizes it's not going to happen like that. And he begins to cry, and his tears fall in a lake from which a lotus comes, and Tara arises with swift wisdom, also making a vow to assist him in his unbelievable, universal, altruistic vow. It's a very beautiful and very poetic story. And it does pose that question. You have also Shantideva, you know, the from the Bodhikari Avatara, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It's one of His Holiness' favorite verses, is where he's saying, you know, and may I continually return to release all sentient beings from suffering, you know, endlessly, to make that commitment. Well, that kind of, what that's pointing at, and what that inspires, is really, really, I won't say unbelievable, but it's really quite very, very powerful. It's a powerfully motivated universal altruism, which could make a huge difference for so many. Ultimately, I don't know, because it would just be cosmological or metaphysical speculation, yeah. But if a continuous process of purification and evolution and everything else is going on, and the entirety of it is beginningless and endless, is it not conceivable that there will come a point in time where consciousness no longer needs this sort of platform to continue in? And if you completely change the nature of the conventional world that we live in, then the potentials for suffering are going to change accordingly. Now, but here we're in the realms of, as I say, metaphysical speculation. Nobody is ever going to be either, it's like the God question. There's no proof or refutation of the existence. So similarly with this, it's sort of like deep or far-reaching metaphysical speculation that maybe nobody will ever know the answer to. But for me, the idea that there is already a story that Avalokiteshvara made this vow and then was in tears because he realized the potential impossibility of ever realizing it, but still didn't give up. And then his tears gave birth to Tara's quick wisdom, who reaffirmed his commitment and her desire to share that task, is just very beautiful and very inspiring. Yeah, that's the best I can offer. If other people have got comment or want to discuss.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Amanda, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Just two thoughts in towards this. Don't know if they're relevant or not, but is sort of the understanding of beginningless and endless in the minds that we have now could be cognitive of obscurations. And my other thought was that the cause of consciousness is the previous moment of consciousness. And that cause won't go because it was the previous moment of consciousness. So it's not going to disappear. It's going to be endless.
Hello, can you repeat the last bit? You froze a little. and the sound went. So I've missed the last part.
Sorry. So my thoughts on endless and beginningless. The cause of consciousness is the previous moment of consciousness. So that cause, being the previous moment of consciousness, isn't going to disappear. That cause is going to exist ad infinitum.
For me, if the cause were to exist beginninglessly and endlessly, then for that to be the case, it would have to be an inherently existing cause. But I'm being invited to consider that no cause is an independently existing from its own side.
No, but they can be eternal. They're not permanent, but they can be eternal.
The cause, when we use the terms cause and effect, they're kind of designations that we make to explain something, but we know in really quite ordinary things that what is a cause in one context is an effect in another. So these two, this is a good question because it's where we were going back to our reflections about what's the relationship between dependent and interdependent, and recognizing the relativity of that, and that there's really no inherently existing dependence or interdependence. And it's the same idea here with cause and effect, that we say, oh, well, this was the cause of that. But then when we say, well, what was that? Well, that was an effect in relation to something else that was a cause. And the causes and effects that we're observing or noting are not taking place in a kind of a frozen universe. The process is continuous. Yeah. So there's a transformation. It's not as if a cause comes along, which is eternal, permanent, partless, inherently existent, call it what you will, has this effect and then stays there. Because what's happening is something transforms into something else, is what I'm going to suggest. So when it's transformed, that's not to say at some further part in the process, it might not be a cause with further effects, but it won't be the same as the one that was before.
No, sure, yeah, consciousness will change.
Okay?
Yeah, it will change. It's not. There's no inherent existence to consciousness, so because of that definition, it will change.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if you're looking,
but I believe it is eternal. My understanding is things can be eternal.
I think perhaps it's for consideration, and it really for consideration. You don't want any more mansplaining. It's for all of us to kind of consider. Yeah, I think what may be going on here is that when we think the eternal, what we're thinking about is emptiness, infinite potential without beginning and without end.
Yeah.
That is such, but no things are, no conditioned things are. But of course, everything that is, arises within something.
Yeah. Within emptiness.
I mean, a good analogy is space, no? Space not in the sense of the gas or air or things that we lob rockets into, but in terms of the absence of obstruction. Without that being there, nothing could exist.
Yeah, well, that's
a thing.
One of the few permanent phenomena.
Yeah. So beginningless and endless ground, if you like, and that being emptiness itself. But remembering, of course, that emptiness is itself empty. I think that is where our notions or urgings of eternal are pointing to from the point of view. Steph, yeah.
Can I ask, can I ask a question, or just comment on the back of what you've just discussed with Amanda, that consciousness itself is empty of existing inherently, and the causes that give rise to consciousness that exists are empty of existing inherently, and there will always be causes that give rise to consciousness. There's always going to be a cause and effect movement, yeah, both of which are empty of existing from their own side, and consciousness itself that manifests due to a cause and effect relationship is also lacking in inherent existence. So is that like the two sides of the same coin kind of thing, when you look at it from a cause and effect kind of relationship, when you're trying to get at a deeper appreciation of emptiness? Or am I just repeating what Amanda and you have just said? Probably.
No, but it bears repeating and bears coming at from different angles, because I don't, the difficulty maybe is, or maybe it's not such a difficulty, but I think we're always struggling for a perfect articulation of it. And maybe there's not going to be one. We can come close, and that's, if you said, well, why is philosophy worthwhile doing if things are the way they are? If ultimate reality is ineffable, then no one's ever going to come up with a completely satisfying, that's it, let's go home description of it. So then why would you bother at all if the goal of the enterprise as a regulative ideal to come up with a kind of a perfect description of reality is not really possible? Well, why would you do it? You do it because it's worth keep refining what you've got, because it's always pointing at something, inspiring us, helping us, guiding us to coming back to what's actually there and correcting our erroneous judgments about it. So there's the value of it. So I don't think you were just repeating. You were the same. I think you were pointing in exactly the same direction. But you were interestingly saying, hang on, this is the relationship between cause and effect, and the way this goes on beginninglessly and endlessly. In any situation where there is something there, something existing. So
this is where we get the idea of ultimate and conventional truth, in that ultimately there isn't anything there, but conventionally there is this cause and effect relationship that's in perpetual motion, that has a relative existence, but when you look at the cause itself and the effect itself, these two are also lacking in eternal existence, inherent existence. So you've got this is the ultimate and conventional truth kind of thing. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Does anybody else have any other questions? Sorry.
Are there any other thoughts, comments? It doesn't have to be, particularly, there was quite a range of things we were talking about yesterday, or therefore having a look at on retreat.
Ruth, would you like to unmute yourself and and lower your hand if you can and ask your question?
Oh, hello, Ruth. Yeah, got you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Hello there.
Hello.
Yes, it's just a bit of a hello. Hi, Roy. It's just a bit of a practical thing, a question, if you like. Last night I had the most extraordinary dream, which was clearly related to the retreat. I could describe it if you like, but the
Yes,
real
please.
point about it is that you want me to describe it. Yeah.
Well, no,
Well,
as far as you want to, or it's useful. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you the implication of it. It was quite a powerful dream, and it was very much related to the retreat yesterday because, okay, I will describe it. So I'm sitting, it's like there's something, a scene where something is watching something happening, and it's in the mountains, and I see this pack horse with bags over it coming up the mountain. But then I observe as it's coming up, there's a cliff edge and it's going to fall off. But I feel like actually what's watching is actually me, I think, but I'm not sure. And then suddenly I had this extraordinary image of a rabbit, which was almost not like a dream. It was almost like quite visionary. So I thought that was quite an extraordinary experience. But what struck me as I'm listening to the conversation today is this notion of independent and dependent, because I think there's a tendency for us to think that when something like that happens, it comes from nowhere, or it's you know, in the Christian understanding, it could be God or something that gave you that vision. Yeah. But my understanding in Buddhism is that it's a dependent arising. So the reason it happened is because of the previous cause, of which part would have been contemplating independent, dependent, contemplating becoming liberated. And so the nature of the dream itself would be dependent on that. And the way in which that dream was organized would also be dependent. So I'm just thinking it's an example of how there is no inherent thing out there that would cause something like that. Does that make any sense to you?
It's a brilliant example, I think. It's a brilliant example. Yeah, and it's also it's there's quite a lot in the Buddhist tradition, the use of our experience of dreams related back to our waking life to understand these very sorts of relationships in terms of dependence, interdependence, what we think to be real, the way we mistake appearances as existing in a way that they don't. It's a fascinating area, and I think that's a really wonderful example.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. It just struck me the dependent nature of it. Yeah. That's quite revealing to me myself, actually. Not that I would have thought it was an inherent influence. Definitely not. But it just struck me. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, because it is a very important one, because I think it's particularly highlighted in Lama Tsongkhapa's insight, is that emptiness and dependent arising are one and the same thing. They're not two separate things. So what is emptiness? Emptiness is dependent arising. It is dependent arising. Dependent arising is emptiness. You know, they're inseparable. The two conceptual isolates of the way we carve reality up, but they're really one and the same. And I've always thought, yes, of course, because if there wasn't emptiness in the sense being posed, nothing would be able to live, nothing would be able to grow, nothing would move, nothing would change. We'd be in a frozen universe. Yeah, it's emptiness itself is the endless realization of potential. It's the very vibrancy of life itself, one way of looking at it, I suppose. But is it a thing? No. it itself is empty and so on. Fascinating. Yeah. Are there any others? Or shall we?
Can I just get you to mute yourself again, please, Ruth? Sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, Roy.
Just a second. A bit slow here.
It's okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments, points that people would like to raise for Roy?
Otherwise, we can move on a bit. Okay. So it's really now, I suppose, getting into seeing the interdependence of phenomena, and that includes ourselves as well. And because everything that kind of appears in our experience seems to our senses and consciousness to exist independently, separately from their own side, even though they don't, that they don't exist in the way that they appear to us, we kind of transparently, in that earlier sense, mistakenly assume and believe that everything exists in a much more substantial, concrete, black and white way than they actually do. And that's the way in which we're drawn into afflictive emotions, which sort of create the seeds of suffering for both ourselves and others. And the only way we can either prevent or undo any of that is by reflecting again and again on the dependent nature of everything. If we are present to that, if we just bring presence, mindfulness, alertness, and awareness to the experiences of the five senses and mental consciousness, and then assisted with a little analytical insight, we can begin to cultivate that insight. But because the nature of the mistaking appearances for existing in the way that they don't is such a kind of deep and well-grounded in habit, going back a very long way, we're very, very fortunate if it just opens up in a moment. That's not to say it couldn't happen. But for most of us, we need to kind of think, reflect, cultivate. And this is why Buddhist practitioners hold very highly the regular practice of meditation, even to the point where some teachers will actually say, well, even if you were to be enlightened, you wouldn't give up making sessions. one can kind of see that, and why that is, and why one might find it most unsatisfactory if one did. So all phenomena, everything helpful, harmful, cause and effect, arise and come into existence and established in reliance on other factors. And I kind of always go back to, don't remember much, but some verses of Nagarjuna stick out, and I think it's quite close to also one in the Pali Canon from the Buddha, because of this, that arises. And Nagarjuna said, when this arises, that arises, like short when there's long, due to the production of this, that's produced, like the light from the production of a flame. And that verse is in his Precious Garland of Advice, if I remember, which is a wonderful kind of short text to look over and open up to the wisdom of Nagarjuna. So in the context of dependence, everything can kind of function as it does. Actions and their effects take place, and everything else in the world are not just figments of our imagination. We're not being invited to pick up a nihilistic view or believe that everything actually is totally an illusion, because as I was pointing out earlier, there'd be no way out if that were the case. So in the sense of going back to His Holiness, three causes, three kind of categories of dependence, the causal, the mereological, the dependence of the whole on the parts, and then dependence on thought. Dependence on thought doesn't mean that we're just mental creations, but the idea that we or anything else is wholly independent, not dependent in any way, existing from its own side. The contention is that indeed is a figment of the imagination, kind of completely fantasized way of existing, because nothing actually exists quite like that. although we frequently implicitly assume to the contrary. So it's quite important not to assume the kind of rather exaggerated notion that phenomena exist independently, exclusively under their own power from their own side, and not have the exaggerated idea that we don't exist and deny the function of cause and effect. If I go back into the one I prepared earlier from His Holiness, he says, hang on a minute, it goes off. That's better. He says, falling into the chasm of exaggeration, we're drawn into satisfying a conception of ourselves that exceeds how we actually are, an impossible feat. So realizing that phenomena are dependent arisings, avoid the extremes of dangerous denial, realizing that they're empty of inherent existence, avoids the extreme of that dangerous exaggeration. And the realization of emptiness as it's directly experienced in non-dual meditation can't be adequately expressed in words, but that doesn't mean that emptiness cannot be reflected and meditated on. That the analytical process and the reflection can be quite useful in pointing to something which will lead us in the direction of a non-dual and direct experience of insight into the way things actually are, to begin to see that the appearances are indeed just that, and not themselves to be mistaken for ultimate reality, going back to Steph's point about the two truths. So in the kind of traditional meditation process, to actually begin to utilize some of this way of entering into the path, there are kind of 4 basic steps to guide analytical meditation for realization here. And you can begin, obviously, by contemplating things or phenomena or meditating on yourself. You can go either way, but many teachers in the tradition recommend meditating on yourself first. I mean, after all, we're the ones who experience all the pleasures and pains. We have the possibility to cultivate positive qualities in the same way that we ought to easily pick up troublesome habits and accumulate karma. So all the noise, joy and fun and mess are made by you and me, but they're made by ourselves. So it's always made sense to me to think about looking into our own nature first, and then on seeing that, extending that insight to other things. So the kind of method that's developed in order to end the self-deception that arises because we accept that we inherently exist in the way that we appear to ourselves, we begin with ourselves before looking at other things. And the goal is to realize that we don't exist in and of ourselves as we usually think we do. So let's see if we can build a short meditation, probably no more than 20 minutes or so, to bring us to conclusion, and then it'll give you a kind of a guideline for thinking further until this afternoon. So this, of the 4 steps that are suggested in His Holiness's text, this is the first step, if you like. And he precedes it in his work with the lines from the Buddha from the Pali Canon, saying, just as a chariot is verbalized in dependence on a collection of parts, so conventionally a sentient being is set up depending on the mental and the physical aggregates. It's a kind of translation of that verse from the Pali Canon. So if we bring our attention from where it is now again Just let go of anything we may have been holding on to mentally, physically, emotionally. Pay attention to the experience of the five senses. Check out mental consciousness. Just see what's there. As much as possible, bringing mind and body together, the attention and the experience. In union, allowing mind and body together to settle into the natural state. Checked out what's there, just radically simplify, leave everything else as it is. Don't suppress anything or block anything, chase after anything. If you find yourself distracted, just gently bring the attention back. Radically simplify and just leaving everything else going on the way it does. Pay particular attention to the felt somatic sensations of the body. Pick up the rhythm of the breath. Just rest there a while, getting some attentional balance and stability. Just get rid of the breath as an object of the attention. Let it go. Just rest, clear, alert, relaxed, in completely open, choiceless awareness. And gently follow the line of thinking. Trying to follow, but not holding on too tightly. Trying to remain, abide in this kind of calmer place. So the Buddha taught that there is no self, that we're selfless. Nonetheless, we all feel that we're here, right here and now. Here I am with all my parts, body, mind. So surely we're indeed here, no? Here we are, with our body and mind in and of and by ourselves. We kind of feel self-existent, here and now, in ourselves. So there does indeed appear to be a self. Don't we already kind of naturally feel this way? Don't we feel that we kind of have to exist in this way? I mean, what do you mean, no self? What about me? That very feeling is the feeling of inherent existence. It's that one that very often in the text you see it referred to rather technically as the object of negation. It's that very feeling. And the suggestion is it's actually the very opposite of the way things may actually exist. So if you do feel that way right now, I mean, you're making progress because you've successfully identified the very thing that the Buddha's saying doesn't exist in the way you think it does. We're noticing a very basic appearance. Not really possible to proceed in the meditation unless you understand that one without knowing that very directly. It's just a conceptual exercise. It's kind of undeniable too that all phenomena, including this sense of ourselves, kind of habitually pop up and appear to us as if they exist from their own size. But at least we may be beginning to entertain the idea that it might be a false view. You know, if we suspend judgment and say, well, yeah, possibly things may not exist in the way that they appear, including this one. Let's go on a journey. Let's test it out. See if it is it really the way things are, or is it a false view? So, noticing that you feel yourself very solid, very real, something that doesn't depend on other things, and so not something just imputed by consciousness. Although it's possibly a false view, it could be helpful. So if you kind of base yourself on what actually and undeniably appears, you kind of reaffirm the own thingness of yourself, the kind of very thing that's being denied by the Buddhist view, what's called the object of negation. Nevertheless, kind of valuing this direct experience roots us more in the very stuff of appearance and less in thought. It makes it easier to kind of understand and appreciate what actually is being refuted, denied, or negated here. The seemingly establishment of a strong sense of yourself somehow inherently and independently existing by way of its own character. When you get down to experiencing this level of being able to distinguish the appearance of yourself and objects as if they were established from their own side, if you're a Buddhist, there might be a bit of a struggle because, you know, it seems that Buddhism is wrong because it seems to want to refute this undeniable feeling that I'm right here with all my parts, mind and body in and of myself. But without this kind of initial step of getting into your own experience, recognizing and perceiving directly what is actually appearing to you now as yourself in your meditation, you can easily treat the absence of inherent existence as merely a kind of an abstract topic, or perhaps even feel that it's correct without ever really understanding its implications at an experiential level. So we're pursuing this a bit because unless it becomes more than an intellectual understanding, any kind of actual progress on the path is going to be different. Mind and body, the individual parts, the whole and the parts over time, are the kind of basis on which we say I. That's what I refers to, what we refer to when we say I. But those things are not actually us, and we're not in them. Even if the aggregates, as the Buddhists describe them, form, feeling, perception, compositional factors, karma and consciousness, have certain qualities, they still don't have the prerequisites for being called a person. They're kind of qualities that are attributes of a person, or suitable to be, when they're together in that way, we say, oh, there's a person there, but they're not the person. So from this perspective, the person is kind of posited by thought, independence on those things. And when we experience or conceive of ourselves as inherently existing, we don't analyze whether this sense of ourselves as an inherently existing person or the mental and physical aggregates that are its basis are the same or different. We just kind of conceive or experience ourselves as inherently existing out of a natural conditioning to do so. Kind of at the coarsest level, we can consider ourselves to be permanent in the sense of not changing, unitary, in the sense of being partless and independent, in the sense of not depending on the mental and physical aggregates. If we question and reject the idea, perhaps by thinking about time, death, impermanence, and the relationship between parts and wholes, then we can still kind of consider ourselves at least as a self-sufficient, substantially existing entity. So never mind all that. Yeah, I understand all that, but there still seems to be something out of all this that's self-sufficient, substantial, kind of exists in that way. So usually again, no matter what appears to our minds, it seems to exist from its own side, completely independent of thought. When we pay attention to an object, whether it be ourself, another person, body, mind, or some material thing, the gong, the computer, whatever it is, we accept how it appears as if this is its final inner real condition. Going back to our very direct experience of ourselves within the tradition, they say, imagine that you've been criticized for something that you haven't done. When somebody criticizes us, saying, you did this and we didn't do it, we have this very strong experience. I didn't do that. Even just thinking about it now, we can all probably remember times when that's occurred. Kind of it's worth going back to. Think of this very strong, substantial sense of I that arises when that occurs. Or maybe when you forget something important, you get angry at your own mind, don't you? Oh, my awful memory. Damn it, whatever. And then the I that's angry and the mind at which you're angry appear to be completely separate from one another. Fascinating. And then when we're upset about some aspect of the body, the same thing occurs. The I that's angry seems to have its own being in and of itself, distinct from the body at which you're angry. And this I seems to kind of stand by itself as self-instituting, established by its own character. It doesn't appear to be set up or just arise independence on mind and body. So whenever we do something either terrible or something wonderful, whether it's some awful thing we've done or an arm-punching moment, this strong, very, very obvious, concrete and vividly clear sense of I appears. And fifth Dalai Lama had a very good way of expressing this. He said, sometimes the I will seem to exist in the context of the body. Sometimes it will seem to exist in the context of the mind. Sometimes it will seem to exist in the context of the feelings, discriminations, or other factors. At the end of noticing a variety of modes of appearance, you will come to identify an I that appears to exist in its own right, that from the start is self-established, existing undifferentiated with mind and body, and which are also mixed like milk and water. This is the first step, the ascertainment of the object to be negated in the view of selflessness. You should work at it until deep experience arises. So just let go completely now of following those thoughts. Drop. Come back, just be present to whatever experience we have of the five senses and mental consciousness, and just rest there, still in body, speech, and mind. Senses vividly alive. When you hear the sound of the gong struck, just let go completely. Relax. Neither meditate nor not meditate. Just be present to whatever experience you have. So, however you're following the schedule, whether you're doing formal meditation or going about your business, making food, whatever we're doing, see if between now and this afternoon you can just glance every now and again, gently pay attention to see if you can, where is this sense of I? Where's it arising from? Where do you feel it? But try and actually feel it, not just have an idea of it, to try and really get a feel. What is that one that says, yeah, here I am, right here, right now? Sometimes you may not notice it at all. Other times it may be quite weak. Sometimes it might be really strong. Just see if you can gently be present, coming back to body, mind, breath, but with this idea of seeing if we can identify that very feeling or sense of self and the different ways that it comes, goes, arises. That's the kind of next step, because if you've got a really good sense of that, rather than just an idea of it, then the next steps in the meditation can be really quite powerful. Okay, thanks very much. Should we do short dedication? Jang Chub Sem Churin Poshe Ma Kir Panam Kir Gujing Kir Panyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Lu Pelwa Jo. Lonytawa Rinpoche, Makyu Panam Kyagujing, Kyapa Nyampa Mepa Yang, Gongne Gongdu Pelwa Jo. May the precious supreme jewel bodhicitta arise where it has not arisen. And where it has arisen, may it not decline, but increase further and further. May the precious view of emptiness arise where it has not arisen. And where it has arisen, may it not decline, but increase further and further. Thank you very much. Much look forward to seeing you at 2:30, half an hour earlier than scheduled. But that will enable me to do my call at 4 o'clock, for which I'm very grateful. And then we'll return to the normal schedule for Monday and Tuesday.